What were the ramifications of intervening in that review process?
Well, right now, we're not going to do it, is what Secretary Esper says. What message does that send to the troops?
Well, what message does it send?
That you can get away with things. We have to have good order and discipline. It's the backbone of what we do. And the Trident review process with the senior enlisted reviewing fellow senior enlisted is critical. The senior enlisted of our military are the backbone of our military. They are the girder of good order and discipline. They can handle this. They can handle this in each one of their communities.
The now fired Navy Secretary Richard Spencer explained to CBS News exactly why President Trump should not have intervened in the Navy's process of discipline regarding an accused war criminal who was later acquitted of the most serious charges. It was a point that he also made in his letter to the president accepting his own termination. That letter, which became public over the weekend, is a remarkable document, not the least because it comes after 2 weeks of nonpartisan career U.S. officers offering their testimony against the president's actions under oath in the impeachment inquiry. Spencer writes, quote, "I no longer share the same understanding with the commander-in-chief who appointed me in regards to the key principle of good order and discipline. I cannot in good conscience obey an order that I believe violates the sacred oath I took in the presence of my family, my flag, and my faith to support and defend the Constitution of the United States." Here to talk about just how enormous the moral and legal stakes are in this story, Paul Rieckhoff, founder of the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, and Lawrence Korb, former Assistant Secretary of Defense and a retired Navy captain. Paul, since you're right here, you know, the president has made noises about doing things like this. There was a pardon earlier in the year. How big a deal is what has happened over the last 48 hours?
It's a massive deal. I think it's maybe one of the most destructive things he's done in his entire presidency, and he's done some bad stuff, right? I mean, this cuts to the very fabric of good order and discipline in the military, the place where they have guns and run our wars and protect our nukes. I mean, if he starts meddling with the good order and discipline in the military, a lot of bad things could happen. And I think what's interesting here is the Navy's actually standing up. The Navy SEALs are pushing back. They're drawing a line. They want to take back Gallagher's Trident, and Spencer's making a stand. This might be the most important stand we've seen yet, and it's trying to block a pattern of politicization and now weaponization of the military that goes back to the Kurds, it goes back to the Khan family, it goes back to the July 4th parade. It goes Mattis, right? This is a pattern of Trump reaching in and disrupting the military. And at the end, the only folks that are really happy about this are our enemies. Our enemies are celebrating every time this happens and they see the commander-in-chief fighting with the Navy SEALs. Our enemies all around the world are clapping their hands and celebrating.
Lawrence, what do you think?
Well, essentially, Paul is right, because these terrorist groups can recruit people by saying, look at the United States. They come over here and kill innocent civilians, and they get away with it. I mean, this follows on what happened at Guantanamo, so it feeds into their narrative. And it also undermines the order and discipline. And the real villain in this is the Secretary of Defense, because basically he claimed that he was firing Spencer because Spencer had communicated with the White House. The president's been after Spencer since last March. He's been talking to him. And Spencer was also acting Secretary of Defense at one time. So he's, you know, it's interesting. Pompeo and Esper are both West Point classmates of the same year. I don't know what was going on that year, but they're not living up to what they were supposedly taught.
You know, part of what I find unnerving here and sort of enraging is the president and his defenders presenting these moves as sort of like pro-supporting our armed forces, pro-supporting service members who got a raw deal. But let me just read this about platoon members in Gallagher's own unit. Some platoon members were so distraught by Gallagher's actions, investigators said, they tampered with his sniper rifle to make it less accurate and fired warning shots to scare away civilians before the chief had a chance to shoot them. This was someone who the war fighters he was fighting with really had a problem with.
Yeah, I mean, there have been a number of checks throughout the system that have been trying to keep this guy in line all the way through to a, UCMJ court-martial. And the Navy actually did hold him accountable, at least on one charge. So this is literally like reaching in and freeing criminals, right? I mean, if you were driving in a street...
Which the president has the power to do in the civilian context as well, right? He's got an absolute power to pardon.
But there are rules of the road, and you're not supposed to hit civilians with your car. You're not supposed to drive off the road and crash into buildings. You're not supposed to speed. And when you do, you're supposed to be held accountable. And that's that's what's happening here. He's taking the rules and throwing them out the window and sending a message to everyone else in the military that if you break the rules, you can get out of it. It's a get out of jail free card if you go on Fox News and make your case. And it weaponizes our military to his advantage. This is a calculated move. I mean, whether it's the dog or Gallagher, he's weaponizing these people and our military because he knows it works for the populist base. There's nothing that appeals to the populist movement and the populist core more than our military. And he's playing that tune over and over again, and it's very, very dangerous.
Daily Beast reporting just, I think, an hour ago that he tells allies he wants the absolved war criminals, the pardoned war criminals, to campaign for him.
100%. This is the plan.
This is the playbook. They've heard Trump talk about how he'd like to have the now cleared Clint Lawrence, Matthew Goldstein, or Edward Gallagher show up at his rallies, even having a moment on stage at his renomination. How big a deal is it institutionally for Spencer, the Secretary of the Navy, to be fired and to write that letter, Lawrence?
Well, I think it's sort of like when Secretary Mattis wrote the letter, basically when Trump had this insane policy in Syria to get out in the middle of the conflict. And I think he's making a statement. Now, this is a lifelong Republican, you know, coming out against them and basically saying that you're ruining our military by doing this. You know, since 2011, 150 members of the SEALs have lost their trident pin. So they do come after people before. What about those people? Are they going to, you know, come out and say, well, wait a second, why can't you do it for me? And don't forget, at the same time, Trump pardoned an Army First Lieutenant Lawrence, who had been convicted of killing 3 Afghans, and it was 9 members of his team testified against them.
Trump's making people choose me or choose your oath. That's the line he's drawing in the sand right now. And Esper, the Secretary of Defense, has chosen to go with Trump in politics instead of our troops. And many other people are going to have to choose in the next couple of weeks as well.
You know, this is also going to cascade through the services. I mean, and obviously, when you're talking about, you know, almost 2 million people, this is a heterogeneous group of people. It's a diverse group of people with diverse politics. But you got to imagine it's going to be polarizing within folks there as well.
It's terribly divisive, and it's demoralizing. It's coming on the backs of abandoning our Kurdish allies, which in my view was the most unpopular thing he's done across the military. So morale is going to suffer, and our troops are going to suffer as a result.
Lawrence Korb, Senior Fellow from the Center for American Progress. Paul Rieckhoff, host of the podcast Angry Americans. Thank you, gentlemen, both.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.